I know where I'm going to be laid to rest. And part of that location is very much tied in with my grandmother, my father's mother. It actually started much earlier in her life when my dad, the oldest, had a brother and then another brother, and his brother Ronnie got sick when he was a kindergartner and died shortly thereafter of leukemia, very much curable in today's world. So imagine my grandmother grieving the loss of a child. She had 2 more daughters after that as well. So when my grandfather bought the grave for Ronnie, he very efficiently decided it was a good time to buy a grave for himself and for his wife. And then because he's a good German McKinney, could get a good deal, he got 3 other ones next to those and gave those to my parents. And of course there was a 3rd grave, and that's where I'm going. So I know where I'm going to be at rest. And I'll be next to my grandmother, who not only, frankly, had a fairly blessed life, certainly materially blessed, but in many other ways, great person of faith, but then had, later on in her life, had to care for my grandfather for a good year of a lot of suffering, watching him slowly die of cancer. 9 more years of living on her own before cancer took her rather quickly at the age of 83. I think of her, and especially in so many ways, where we can say a life that's blessed is certainly not exempt from suffering. And that we're asked to take a perspective in this feast day of the Assumption of Mary into heaven of our own heavenly destiny. And so we're asked, first and foremost, to focus on Mary. We heard in our scriptures that she has a special place in our church because of her son, the firstborn of the dead. Mary, if you will, the secondborn of the dead, but not stopping there. It's really something that's promised for each of us. Mary is very relatable because in the same way as my grandmother, you could say, well, she was the mother of God, and yet she too had much suffering in her life. Starting off at an early age, having this child, losing her husband at some point, losing her son in a very brutal way. And then later on, as she finally left this earthly journey, there was a lot of the usual for a lower class citizen in an occupied country. We also know, though, that she was a part of the early church, that the church was full of the Holy Spirit, that she was in the company of the apostles and many other disciples. And that's what helped her on her earthly journey to continue to move forward. And her presence in our life, her intercession in our life, helps us to continue to move forward. I could say that, we all need to have the heavenly perspective and have that end goal in mind and maybe even envision what's it like to where we'll be laid to rest, if that's a known place here on earth. But frankly, I think most of us are way too busy and frankly way too tired to care a lot about that long-term thinking. But it does help, and maybe when we bring it back into our everyday lives, that what we look at for today, because today is really the only day we can live now anyway. We don't know if there will be a tomorrow. We don't know if we might be dying decades from now. But what we do know is that we're invited into that deeper union with her son, and especially the model that Mary gave, that if we're going to live this day fully, and particularly in the promised peace of Christ, if we're going to rest in his peace in our everyday living, that the only way we really do that is to be very concentrated on what we need to do today to follow God's will. When Mary is proclaiming the goodness of the Lord, she's also proclaiming that she is giving herself over once again to God and to be his handservant in following his will. And that when we concentrate our efforts today in following God's will and live in his peace, and knowing that we need a lot of help with that we will find that same foretaste of the complete communion with God promised to us in heaven. Mary, whose very body shared the same blood as Jesus and has that same intimate communion with him, is a help for the same for us. And just as we have that foretaste of heaven with that intimate communion with Jesus, the firstborn from the dead in this Eucharist, we celebrate Mary's Assumption because we celebrate that a piece of heaven is accessible to us and helps us to get through today as we journey toward the heavenly kingdom. And so, may we do the will of the Father with Mary's help today, so that today we can be in peace, and that whenever our earthly journey ends, then we too can rest in eternal peace.